as I hope you were. Thank you. Just to summarize from last week, in terms of the most important principles of understanding, when I look at Shabbat and I say, okay, how do I know what is and what is not permitted? I'll tell you a funny anecdote. At least for me, it's funny. Um, um, Many years ago, I was teaching a shiur for giyur, a conversion class in the Israeli army, and there are many immigrants who come to Israel or are even born in Israel, but they're not halachically Jewish from mother. Many of them from the Russian immigration, and so the army gives them an opportunity through the army service to do a conversion class, which is an amazing thing in itself, because you have a situation in which someone is putting his life on the line for the Jewish people, but he's not considered Jewish. And there's an obligation, or at least the country of Israel feels an obligation to help them if that's what they want. So I was giving this class, and then um, um, it was they went for their first Shabbat to try to keep Shabbat at a according to what we had taught them. There was the beginning, it was just the beginning of the course, and we were learning about Shabbat, and then they went off to spend Shabbat in a religious community. And then one of them afterwards, the next Sunday, when they came back to the base, so he said to me that he had been stuck for a few hours in the toilet. I said, why were you stuck in the toilet for a few hours on Shabbat? Was there something, I mean, was it the key? Was it this? He says, no, I didn't know if I was allowed to flush the toilet or not. So I didn't want to hurt anyone. So I just stayed there until Shabbat was over. So, in other words, you can find yourself in different situations, especially with Shabbat, in which you really don't know what to do. And what seems to be, and what Rav Shmuel was teaching us last week, is that many times what seems to be what we would consider difficult is not what is prohibited on Shabbat. The example used in the Talmud, for example, is carrying a bench. So if you're dragging the bench along the ground, as we learned last week, that could be problematic. Why? Because that is connected to the agriculture and to the milachot, to the milacha in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. Whereas if you're carrying the same bench and doing even something which is more difficult, which is to put it on, you're carrying it on like this on your back, then you're not doing any milacha. And I think that gives following up from last week, what we have to understand in terms of Shabbat is it's almost mathematical in the sense of not only what do I think is allowed or is prohibited, but does it fit the rules which teach me what is and what is not, which always go back to a few things. Either it goes back to the milachot, to the avot melacha that we learned last week with Rav Shmuel, the 39 melachot, which Rav Shmuel broke down for us very, um, I think, into categories that we can understand, which are connected to agriculture, to the cooking, etc., etc. Or we have things which are connected to those melachot, which is our secondary, which are called which are called tolodot. In other words, they're connected to that. Or you can have things which are connected to an overall atmosphere of the Shabbat, of what is and what is not, creating the atmosphere that is allowed. For example, what if I'm not doing a melacha, but a melacha is being done? For example, a simple example, what if I put on a washing machine an hour before Shabbat and the cycle runs for an hour and a half? I'm not doing anything. I set it running from before the Shabbat. The Mishnah talks about something similar in terms of what if I have an irrigation canal and I open the water before. But so what if I'm not doing anything myself, but it's continuing on from something that was permissible, but now I have a washing machine going on, and my entire apartment hears this thumping from the machine, boom, 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 as I make the kiddush. So does that make sense to us? So that could be another type of understanding. In other words, maybe I'm not doing something, but is this something that could be problematic? Another example that I'll give you, and Rav Shmuel has joined us, I'm going to let Rav Shmuel take over. But another example that we can give in terms of trying to break down things, what if you have, I'll give a similar example that we actually use on the Shabbat. If you have the plata, a warm plate, which is connected to a timer, which then goes on and off during the Shabbat. So you're not doing a melacha, but if it's being done, is that acceptable or is it not? In the same sense that the Mishnah talks about, what if you have a fire that you have lit before and it's warming up the food, and you've put and you've added it to and you put your food in the fire before the Shabbat, and then you come out Friday night, you want to have a nice warm meal, and you take your soup out of the fire. So in other words, it's not only the melachot that are being done on the Shabbat themselves, but it has to do with the surroundings, it has to do with the atmosphere as well. And what should the Shabbat look like is also a question that one can ask. Along the same lines, what if you just have your TV on? You're not even touching it, it's not even on a timer, but you have the TV you come back from the prayer, from the service, and you come back and you watch the news on, because it's just on, and you want to know what's happening in the world. Is that okay? Is it not? So I think there's many different levels of, first of all, what is and what is not permissible, then asking ourselves the surroundings of that. We can add on the atmosphere to that. And as Rav Shmuel also said last week, we also have certain things that, even though they might be permissible, we don't do them in order to keep ourselves as far away as possible from the prohibition of the melachot themselves. So all of this, for sure, I think over time we learn, or through questions that we can ask, we can get an idea of where does it fit into the different categories of the melachot, the toledot, whether it's the actual principle of the melacha itself that was prohibited, something connected to it, or is it something that is just removing me or keeping me far away from that prohibition to make sure I don't do it, or is it just an issue of atmosphere itself and what the Shabbat should look like? So I'm going to pass the mic over to Rav Shmuel to continue. Shabbat Tov, Rav Shmuel, and welcome.
Shabbat Tov to everyone. Hashem, hope you've all had a chance to read through the material. I thought maybe to do a little bit different, just because last time you came without any need for preparation, and this time I understood all of you are quite prepared on having read on the subject. I would like to ask if there's anything in the reading or anything in last week's shiur who you would like to ask about right now, anything that was unclear, anything that you would like to point out.
I just want to see that I don't have read the text. I'm first day of coming this class.
Okay. Everybody has received. Everybody has received the text by email, I assume. So everybody should have the PDF, and everybody will be able to read the chapter structure of Shabbat. Right. Okay. So there were some questions at the end of last lesson. There was the question about carrying. We'll get to those in time. I'd like to do first. Oh, there's a hand raised. Yes, Cecilia Larsson, you have a question, please.
Yes, I'm reading the text and saying we are washing our hands and clean before Shabbat, but even talking about cleaning the feet. And I've never seen that.
Cleaning what? Sorry, the feet.
Washing the feet.
The feet. All right. Okay, so
I've
this is
seen
not.
that. I've seen that in many texts, but I don't see it in the reality.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this is not connected to the melachot of Shabbat, but it's connected to, right, to any situation when we wake up in the morning, the whole year, the whole week, nothing to do with Shabbat. We wash our hands in the morning, and you are right that in the temple, the Kohanim, the priests, they would wash their hands and feet before the service in the temple. And that's where our washing of hands comes from. And really, you're right, theoretically, we should also wash our feet, since if we're like the Kohanim in the temple, then we should do the same as them. Now, practically, we don't do that, as you have noticed yourself. I believe the main reason is because the Kohanim, they would actually walk barefoot on the floor of the temple, and they would do things with that their feet were in that sense in use. We cover our feet anyway with shoes, with socks, so there isn't a reason why our feet should be touching anything, should be touching food or anything like that, or any holy thing, and therefore make it unholy. It's not so practical for us. Our feet are covered the whole time. But the service in the temple was actually done barefoot, and therefore the Kohanim would wash their hands and feet. Okay, but you're quite right, that's not something we Jews do nowadays. Okay, good.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Right. So now I'll continue with some principles, because of course, you can always go into detail, and we should go into details, but it's important that the principles are clear. If the principles are clear in our head, so then the details also make a lot more sense. So we explained that 39 melachot last time, and you've been able to read in the text. I can see they've all been translated into English. Bezrat Hashem, we will in the future look at more practical examples, either through me or the other teachers, but we will look more at practical things. Right? Now, I thought this time to look at certain things, what makes a melacha into a melacha. There's a very interesting rules of a melacha. The interesting rules of what is a Torah prohibition, Isur de'oraita, what is an Isur de'rabanan, what is a rabbinic prohibition, and what is mutar, what is completely permitted, right? Three things. And it's very important to understand, when we talk about these things, when we talk about rabbinic prohibition, you're going to see that a lot. We had in general in halacha, but we have a lot of it in Shabbat. A lot of things will be isur de rabbanan, rabbinic prohibition. Now, it's important to understand what does it mean, rabbinic prohibition. It doesn't mean me and Moshe David and a few other rabbis here decided something. That's not the meaning. Rabbinic prohibition means something that the rabbis who had the original smicha, that means Moses, he put his hands on Joshua, and in that sense passed on his power and his rights to Joshua. Joshua passed it on to the elders, those of you who follow the Wednesday night shir, you just learned about it in Pirkei Avot. There was, if you want, a direct chain of smicha, of granting this official smicha from one generation to another, and these were the real rabbis, so to say, and they sat on the Sanhedrin in the high court in the temple, and they had a very high authority because the Torah says you shall go to the place which Hashem has decided, Jerusalem, and you shall go there and you shall listen to what the judges say, and you shall not deviate left or right. So you actually have God himself telling you you have to listen to the decisions that the Sanhedrin has voted on. That's what the Torah says. So anything that the Chachamim of the before the Talmud decided, or in the Talmud even, because they still had the rabbis who had this smicha, that is just as binding as a law that's clearly written in the Torah. It says in the Talmud, anybody who breaks a law of the rabbis, he's breaking the Torah, because the Torah says you are not allowed to stray away from what the Chachamim have said. So when we talk about a din de Rabbanan, something's rabbinically prohibited, we mean one of these early decisions of the rabbis, either before the Talmud, in the biblical times, during the Talmud, yeah? And these are things which we don't have the power to change, yeah? Unless maybe Mashiach comes at the new Sanhedrin. There's talk sometimes in Israel about restarting the Sanhedrin. An interesting discussion, but it's not a practical discussion right now. We don't have a Sanhedrin here, so we cannot change these rules. And we trust the decision of the Chachamim, and if somebody breaks them, he's actually breaking the Torah. Now, you're going to ask me if it's exactly the same whether I break the Rabbanan or whether I break the Torah. Why am I bothering to tell you that? Why does it matter if it's rabbinically prohibited or it's written in or it's prohibited from the Torah? Yeah. So it'll matter very much, because very often when the Chachamim made the law, they often made certain rules, certain leniencies in this law. Yeah. And it might not be as absolute as something that's written in the Torah. So that's why you should pay attention when we're talking about something being prohibited from the Torah, something being prohibited from the Rabbanan, and something being completely permitted. So that's a very, very important point. Now, by the way, let's not confuse things. When we talked about the 39 melachot last week, those are prohibited from the Torah. The Torah tells us don't do melacha, and the oral tradition tells us what is a melacha, and the Mishnah enumerates the melachot. So breaking anything there would have been prohibited by the Torah. If somebody had done it at the time when we had a court, he would have received the death penalty. If he did it on purpose, if he did it by not knowing or by forgetting, he would bring a sacrifice. So those are prohibited from the Torah. Then we have other things, as we'll discuss, which are rabbinically prohibited. So now, let's try to understand, go a little bit deeper into the whole concept of a melacha. As I mentioned last time, there are 39 melachot. But it's not enough just, I'll do the melacha. Melachot have some very interesting rules on how they work. Very different from any other area of the Torah. If you eat non-kosher, chas v'shalom, a Jew eats something that's not kosher, he's done a sin. Yeah? It doesn't matter, in a sense, why he did it. The sin is there. Then there are different categories what the punishment could be. You know, in the times of when we had the Sanhedrin, we had the punishment. So did he do it on purpose? Did he do it by mistake? Was he forced to do it? There are many different situations which will have an effect on the gravity, on the seriousness of the sin. Yeah, that's the point. But the sin is there. In Shabbat, it's a bit different, because in Shabbat, the prohibition is to do a melacha, to do work, or this certain type of melacha, which was done in the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert. So if you do a melacha, then you will have done a sin. But if what you're doing does not qualify as a melacha, it's not similar enough to what was done in the tabernacle, then that's not the melacha. It's not that it's a sin. It's nothing. It's perfectly, you know. So what does this mean in practice? There are certain rules that make a melacha into a melacha. First of all, we see everything the Mishkan was melechet machshevet. It was all well thought of. It was planned activity. It was, we're going to build, God gave very exact rules, and the Betzalel, the artists, they made it with a lot of thought how to do it. Now, what does that mean in practice? If I, okay, let's take a simple case. If I enter a bathroom and on Shabbat, it's dark. I decide it's too dark. I don't care about Shabbat. I turn on the lights. That's a sin. That's a very serious sin. The sin made it done on purpose. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, I enter the bathroom. I'm half asleep. It's the middle of the night. And I don't even think about Shabbat. I forget it's Shabbat. I press the button, turn on the lights. That's also a sin, but it's a lesser level because it's a mistake. I didn't know it was Shabbat, or I forgot it's Shabbat, or no one ever told me there is such a law. That would be a lesser level of sin. But now you have a third scenario. Let's say there's a light switch on the wall, and I'm walking my way, and I'm a bit tired, and I lean to the wall. Oh, the light turns on. That's not a sin at all. That's not a melacha, because I haven't thought about it. I haven't given any thought to what I'm doing. I was doing something else, and it happened to be there was a light switch there. That's called mitasek is the exact law. I'm trying to do something, and a melacha happened to happen. That's completely not a melacha at all. If that happened to you on Shabbat, you don't need to feel bad at all. That's not a melacha. Okay? So that's an interesting point. Melacha has to be thought of. Now, let's take it further to another case. What if I'm doing something which the result of that could be a melacha? Just wait a second. This might don't usually take phone calls in the middle, but this could be serious. So I will just inform you in the middle of a lesson. Okay, so that's one thing you have to know. Mitasek, you just did something else and the melacha happens to happen. That's not a melacha. Another case, what's the role of kavanah? I'm trying to do something. Yeah. So let's say another case. The Talmud brings an interesting case. The classic case is you have a chair, a heavy chair, and you have the ground. It's on a sandy ground, and you want to take your chair from one place to another. Let's say it's surrounded by walls, so there's no problem of carrying on Shabbat. You're all inside your yard, and you start pulling your chair from one place to another on Shabbat. Now, it could be, you're not sure, but it could be, because it's a heavy chair, that it's going to make lines, it's going to dig a bit into the ground. Yeah? So that would be the melacha of choresh. Yeah? Plowing. We said plowing is forbidden on Shabbat. That was the second melacha we learned about last week. So here, you are actually you might be doing plowing. It might happen, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to do something completely different. You're trying to get this chair from one place to another. The result might be plowing. So that is completely, absolutely permitted. That's called davar she'eino mitkaven, a thing where you did not have intention, non-intentional action. But there are two very important very important limitations to the rule. First thing you have to know is davar she'eino mitkaven is only if you're not sure. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen. Other rule, it has to be that this is not what you're trying to do, right? Obviously, because if you're trying to do it, then that's not davar she'eino mitkaven, that's doing the melacha. This is the thing. You're trying to do something else, and it might lead to a melacha. Not that it's definitely going to lead to a melacha. If it's definitely going to lead to a melacha, let's say the most classic case, we have it in every single kitchen now, in every fridge nowadays. You open the fridge, the light turns on. Yeah. So that's interesting, because are you trying to turn the lights on? What are you trying to do? No, you're trying to open the fridge, right? But what does it practically mean? What's going to happen if you do that? The light is going to turn on, and you know it's going to turn on. There's no other way. That's how these fridges are built. So that's called a psik reshe. Psik reshe means, it's Aramaic, it's a funny expression. It means cutting the head. Why is it called cutting the head? It's an expression. It's saying you can't cut the head of a chicken without killing the chicken. Yeah. Somebody could say, I need the head of the chicken to use it, to play with it, to do something with it. So I'm going to cut the head of the chicken. I'm not trying to kill the chicken. But it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. This is what happens. You cut the head of a chicken, the chicken dies. You open a fridge with a light switch, the light will turn on. There's nothing you can do about it. So that would be psik reshe, and that is not permitted, because that is actually doing the melacha. You do an action A, and action A leads directly to action B. So that is psik reshe, and that is forbidden. And therefore, by the way, this is a very practical thing. You should always make sure before Shabbat that you arrange your fridge in a way the lights won't turn on. There are many different ways. Some of them you can actually remove the bulbs. Others you can maybe put some tape on the switch and tape it down so that it doesn't get touched by the door. That's something you have to do, because otherwise you'll not be allowed to open the fridge on Shabbat. An interesting case that comes up is nowadays with psik reshe, it's very, very practical in all these questions of things happening by themselves. Electric sensors, you walk in place. Somebody mentioned it even last time. You walk in a block of flats, lights turn on, lights turn off. So there you have the same problem, because you're not pressing a switch and trying to turn on lights on the one hand. On the other hand, you are trying, for sure it's going to happen. So it's psik reshe. There's no way to walk through this corridor without the lights turning on. So that's a big problem, right? And really, if you come into this problem, you have to discuss it seriously with the rabbi. One thing which is often brought down is there's a difference in halacha, psik reshe, which you benefit from the melacha. Psik reshe de nichale, psik reshe de lo nichale. Psik reshe where you don't care about it. Something which is, whether it happens or not, it's none of my business. There, there's much more room to be lenient. Then we talk about the rabbinic prohibition, because then what's the problem with psik reshe? I'm opening the fridge. I'm trying to open a door. I know for sure that the lamp is going to turn on. So I can't say I'm not trying to turn on the lamp, because of course that's what you're doing. The lamp will go on. But if the lamp was completely irrelevant and there's plenty of light and you can see everything anyway, then it would be an interesting question. It would only be a rabbinic prohibition. You're not allowed to break rabbinic prohibitions either, but there'll be more room and more place to discuss it with the rabbi. Once it's rabbinic, there might be leniencies in certain difficult situations. But this is something to be aware of, that psik reshe is the problem. It's forbidden. Anything that leads directly to a melacha. It's a little bit more lenient if the melacha that's going to come out, it's irrelevant, it does not help you, you're not interested in it. But So that's the world of speculations, the world of Davar She'eino Mitkabel. To keep it simply, what's definitely permitted that you're allowed to do is if you're doing an action, a neutral action, which is not a melacha, and it's not definitely going to lead to a melacha. That's permitted. If it's definitely going to lead to a melacha, then you're already in much more serious problem. Another interesting thing, this was all at the end of your chapter mentioned, I'm just opening it up because in the end of your paper it's written in a very quick and fast. So I thought it's worthwhile to open up these subjects and explain them with a little bit more detail. He mentions also the concept of melacha she'eina tzricha legufa. You're doing the melacha, but you're not doing it for its main reason. You're not doing it for the same reason that was originally meant. Yeah, I heard a very interesting example. Apparently, there are some people now who have fishing competitions. They fish, they go fishing, but they're not interested in the fish. They take out they go fishing, they get the fish. They want to have a nice picture taken with the fish, with this big fish they managed to get out of the sea, and then they throw the fish back in the water. They're not interested in the fish. So that could be a form of melacha she'eina tzricha legufa. You're not interested in the fish. You're interested in, I don't know, in the activity, in the picture, in some other thing. Yeah. So that is a discussion in the Talmud. Is that the Torah prohibition of the melacha? Yeah. You're not trying to do what the melacha is meant for. You're doing something else. You're doing the melacha. You're doing it, but you're doing it for a completely different reason. It's a question. It's the Oraita or the Rabbanan. Generally, we take on it's rabbinically prohibited. It's definitely prohibited, but again, it will be a place to ask a rabbi if it would come up. Somebody mentioned here last week the question of milking cows. Yeah, and I said you're not allowed to milk cows, and somebody said but it's cruel to animals if you don't milk them. So that's a very good point. I once heard one of the options that was often used in milking cows was to milk the cows, to just let the milk go or to waste or something like that. And I think nowadays they have timers there in the milking place, and the machinery will work by itself or things like that, so it's easier. But there is always a leniency in halakha. If you're not trying to get the milk, you're just milking whatever to calm down the animal, you're not going to actually use the milk, you're not interested in the milk, then that would be melacha she'eina tzricha legufa. That's not the melacha the way it's meant to be. You're not interested in the milk. You're just milking for another reason. That would be a rabbinic prohibition according to most authorities. Then you have the way you do the melacha. Again, I was very happy because people asked a lot of questions at the end of last shiur, and that actually opens up a lot of interesting points. Somebody mentioned here about some rabbi who had told him that putting an electronic key in your mouth, maybe you could somehow open an electronic door, and whatever. We weren't so happy about it with Moshe David and me, but I want to explain to you where it comes from. It comes from a very serious place. There is, again, in order for melacha to be a melacha, it has to be done in a normal, natural way. If you do something very strange, that would be called a shinui. Yeah, a shinui, a change, and that would be only a rabbinic prohibition. It would not be anymore a prohibition from the Torah. So that is melacha be-shinui, a change. You make a little change. Okay, very good. I see a question here. It's a very good question. Bezrat Hashem, will leave time at the end of the shiur for questions. So concerning this idea of shinui, concerning this idea of a change, here, so there was this case of using your mouth which would be very funny. It mentions the famous cases writing with your wrong hand. Let's say you're right-handed, you write with your left hand, so you're going to not be able to write properly. It's going to be very funny what you write. That would be a shinui. You carry something, instead of putting it in your pocket, you put it inside your hat or something like that. That would be shinuyim. And again, it's forbidden. It's absolutely forbidden, but it will put it down from a Torah prohibition to a rabbinic prohibition, which again will have very important halachic consideration. This will be very important also in a few more weeks. In a few more weeks, you're going to have, understand shiurim about asking a non-Jew to do something. Here it's going to be very important what you ask a non-Jew. Are you asking him to break the Torah? Asking him to break a rabbinic prohibition? It'll be much easier in halacha to have a permission to ask a non-Jew to break a rabbinic prohibition rather than a Torah prohibition. So that's another important part to be aware of. So that's shinui. That's doing something in a funny way. We'll descend it from a Torah prohibition to a rabbinic prohibition. Then you have another case when they built things in the Mishkan, they built it with the idea of achieving something, of getting something. You build a building because you want the Mishkan. You build a house, you want to use it. You light a fire so that you can warm yourself up. If you do a melacha, but the melacha is completely destructive, then that would be mekalkel. That's mekalkel. That means you're not doing the melacha in a constructive way. You're doing it in a destructive way. You light a fire because you want to burn down your whole house. You're angry. Okay, anger is another thing. I'm not going to go into that. But you're feeling very destructive. You tear down a book. That is not the melacha, because you're not achieving anything. If you notice, when we're looking at the Mishnah talked about tearing. It says tearing in order to tie again. Even the melachot which sound destructive, their purpose is constructive. You're not allowed to erase writing, but it's the original prohibition of Torah is to erase writing with the intention to write better the next time. If you just erase because you want to destroy, because you want to break, that would be a melacha de Rabbanan, which will be much, much, much more space to be lenient than a melacha de Oraita. We mentioned the idea of davar she'eino mitkayem, something that we mentioned quickly. Somebody talking about knots, different things. There is a concept of davar she'eino mitkayem, something that doesn't have existence. It's not going to go on forever. You do a melacha, but it's not going to stay. For example, good example. You start you start writing into sand with your finger. So you get some sort of writing, but the wind is going to blow it away. It's not. For sure it's not going to stay for very long. You put a few sticks together and you get some sort of tent. So you build a tent, whatever, by the smallest wind, it's not going to last till or you write something with onto. There could be many cases where you're doing something which is not going to stand. The effect of the melacha is going to wear away. So that would be again a rabbinic prohibition. It's not the Torah prohibition because you haven't achieved a proper melacha. And the last thing I have to mention is grammar. Grammar means I do something, and this eventually puts down a process which will lead to the melacha. A bit similar to what we said about psiki reisha, but it's a much further effect. Yes, somebody asked here a really good question. I think it's an excellent. That's a very good. So somebody mentioned here, how about preventing a disaster? There's a storm, and if I don't strengthen the wall of the house, everything will be destroyed. This is not allowed on human life. Okay, so that there isn't so much you can do, because you can't build on Shabbat. But there's something very similar. The Talmud speaks a lot about a fire. A fire breaks out on Shabbat, right? So usually a fire will be dangerous to people. So if it's dangerous to people, you have the general rule of pikuach nefesh. I'll mention it maybe more soon. But basically, anything that could in any way endanger human life, you're allowed to break Shabbat at any level. But let's say there is no danger for human life. It's a building in the middle of an island. You're just trying to protect your money, your house, your possessions. So there, it's very interesting. Chachamim speak about putting water around the fire, not pouring it into the fire, around the fire. And as the fire gets bigger, it will get to the water and get extinguished. That would be a case of grama. You're doing something which eventually will lead to a melacha to happen at a later stage. So that is very, very weak rabbinic prohibition, and in very big necessity, it can be permitted. For example, this case of a fire. Okay, but these rules, all these rules, melechet machshev, דבר שאינו מתכוון, פסיק רישא, these are all specific rules about Shabbat that put Shabbat, give Shabbat the idea of the melacha has to be a well thought of process, something where I'm trying to do something and I'm trying to achieve something and I achieve. That is melechet. That's a melacha, and that's very different from any other area of the Torah, as I explained. You eat non-kosher, you eat a non-kosher. It doesn't matter what the intentions. The intentions might have an effect on the seriousness, but the sin is there. In Shabbat, if you're missing certain components that make it into a well thought of action of melacha, then it's not actually the melacha. It might still be rabbinically prohibited because that rabbinic prohibition will has been made to protect the actual melacha, but it won't be the actual melacha, and sometimes will even be completely permitted. Okay, that is the main picture, and you see, if you look at the last page of the chapter, these ideas are explained there on a simple level. There's another thing which is mentioned here, which is not really a Shabbat idea. If you looked at
I can't hear.
What is happening?
Is there a problem? I cannot hear him or see him. Can you guys hear him or see him?
No,
It
the
seems like
picture's
he's frozen.
We cannot hear him.
The picture is freezed.
Yeah.
Oh, mine's totally gone. I cannot see him and I cannot hear him at all.
Well, he's just left now. He's probably coming back in.
I was sending him a message.
sorry about that. We seem to have cut the Baruch Hashem. We're all back, it seems. Everybody's back. Trying to see what's happening here.
We are here.
Okay, everybody's back. Good. So, Mar'it ha'ayin. That's not a special rule of Shabbat. It's a general rule in all areas of halacha. Just like there's a prohibition to, do something wrong. There's also the Torah said you shouldn't do something which looks wrong, which is suspicious, which looks like you are breaking the Torah. Yeah, the laws of kashrut, one of the big discussions was, it's not such a discussion anymore, but it used to be big discussions when the soy milks came. Yeah, all these milk things which come instead of milk, soy milk and non-dairy ice cream and all these things. There was a big discussion among the rabbis: are you allowed to bring, or margarine? You can have margarine without any butter, pure margarine, which doesn't have milk in it. So could you bring a box of margarine to the table when you're having meat, or does it look too suspicious? It looks like you're doing something prohibited. And the Torah says, "V'yitem nekim me'Hashem u'miYisrael." You shall be clean in front of God and in front of the Jewish nation. You shouldn't give a reason for people to suspect you. Nowadays, it's not such a problem because the whole idea of non-dairy milk, non-dairy butter, non-dairy ice cream is so accepted and it's been around for so long. I don't think anybody nowadays is surprised that a religious family goes to his house and he serves you ice cream after a meaty meal, or he gives you margarine to put on your bread next to the chicken. Nobody's going to think he's doing anything wrong because it's such a common thing. But let's say 20, 30 years ago, it was a serious discussion. So the same thing you'll often find in the laws of Shabbat. Yeah, you'll find things that the Chachamim forbade it, Marit ha'ayin. That's purely rabbinic prohibition of something looking wrong. Yeah. For example, the Talmud tells us you shouldn't hang up the washing on Shabbat. What's wrong in hanging up the washing on Shabbat? There's no melacha. But you're not allowed to do the washing. You're not allowed to wash clothes on Shabbat. That's one of the 39 melachot. If people see you hanging up the washing, they'll think, okay, you must have washed it today on Shabbat. So that's a prohibition if to hang up the washing on Shabbat. There are certain ways to do it if you get stuck. It could happen, especially now the winter is coming. So let's say Friday afternoon, you do the washing machine, and Friday night you realize that the washing is in the washing machine. So you could hang it up in a place which is not a drying rack. You put it on a chair, you put it on a place which is not a regular place to hang up washing. It won't look, the Talmud says that doesn't look as suspicious because that's just a place to put it. It's not like you're doing a job now of hanging up all the washing. Somebody raised a hand. Please, Tabitha Rivera.
Yes. What if you live alone and nobody will see it? Because the problem was people seeing it, like looking wrong.
Excellent question. So the Marit ha'ayin, the halacha says, an interesting rule the Talmud tells us, that everything that's forbidden because of Marit ha'ayin, afilu bechadrei chadarim asur. Even if you're in the innermost room where nobody can see it, it's forbidden. So once the Chachamim forbade it, then it won't matter anymore, even if it's extremely unlikely, even impossible for anybody else to come into the room. So that's the general rule. But it's Marit ha'ayin is a complex question. As we said, it can depend a lot on many different things. What's the culture? What's expected? What's considered suspicious? What's not considered suspicious? Bezrat Hashem, you can't learn everything at once, but that's the general rule of Marit ha'ayin, is that once it's forbidden regardless of is there anybody else looking right now or not. Okay, so that is the question of Marit ha'ayin. Okay. Okay, then he mentions sometimes you also have things which are prohibited because uvdin dechol. It's a weekday activity. It's a very difficult area of halacha because it's very hard to say what is a weekday activity, what isn't. Yeah, discussing business, for example, discussing business matter. Now, there's no prohibition in Torah to talk, but it's considered weekday activity to discuss your business because you're not allowed to do business on Shabbat. So that would be maybe. There are many areas which could be considered within the whole. There's many different sort of rabbinic prohibitions. You see from all of these laws, and Bezrat Hashem, you can spend your whole life studying the laws of Shabbat. But the main idea is that the Chachamim wanted to make sure that the halacha is kept, the 39 melachot are kept, and that the spirit of Shabbat is kept. And this is what comes out very strongly in all these laws. He mentions also in the end of the chapter about deriving benefit from prohibited labor. Maaseh Shabbat, it's called. So let's say a Jew, as a Shalom, broke Shabbat already. Can you benefit from it? A Jew cooked on Shabbat. Can you eat it? So the rule is that after Shabbat, as he says here, after Shabbat you'll be able to eat it. You won't be able to eat on Shabbat. Very important law when you look at the kashrut supervision. So people think, okay, so you supervise everything is kosher. So in diaspora, it's not such a big problem. If it's kosher, it's kosher. But in Israel, in addition to checking that everything is kosher, you also have to look that there are not Jews working there on Shabbat, or Jews working there during the Chag, because then you'll be in trouble because the food won't be kosher, even though everything is completely kosher, but there's been Jews who've been breaking Shabbat. Yeah? So that would be also an area to be aware of. Also in our communities, unfortunately, our communities here in Scandinavia, we have a small, I assume most of you are the same as us, we have a small group of observant Jews and a very large group of non-observant Jews who come to the synagogue a little bit for tradition, or some only come once a year for Yom Kippur. So it gets very complicated. It's not just that about themselves, but if they break Shabbat and they achieve something with it, they turn on the lights in your shul. The synagogue is dark. Somebody come and turn on the lights. Are you allowed to pray there? Probably not, right? Because you're benefiting from the lights they turn on. So that's also something to be well aware of, not to benefit from work done by Jews on Shabbat. There's a lot more. There's a whole tractate, Shabbat, one of the longest tractates in the Talmud. So obviously, you can't expect us to cover absolutely everything in a few lessons, but here we've given you some ideas. Now, one very important thing that somebody already mentioned is the concept of pikuach nefesh. Anybody know what pikuach nefesh means?
Yes.
Okay, could you tell us?
It's about when you're in a situation of saving life. Example, if you're a doctor, you're allowed to work because it's about saving someone else's life.
Excellent. Right. So this is very, very important for all of you to be aware of, because this is an area of halakha where you don't have time to ask the rabbi. You have to know the law. The Torah says, "V'chai bahem," you shall live according to them. You shall live according to Torah. "V'chai bahem v'shlo sheyamut bahem." You should live according to Torah. You should not meant to die according to the Torah. That means to say that if you have the choice of either keeping the Torah but putting your life in danger, or to break the Torah, you should break the Torah, except for three sins. Idolatry, you're not allowed to serve an idol. You should rather die than serve idols or serve any power except for God. Murder, you're not allowed to kill anybody, except, of course, if it's a situation of self-defense, that's something else. But to go and commit murder in order to protect, even if, let's say the Talmud's case, somebody comes and tries to kill you and says, "I'll leave you alive if you kill somebody else." You're not allowed to kill somebody innocent else under any circumstance, even if the other option is to die, and then all sexual immorality. You're not allowed to commit adultery, incest, any of these things, even if the other option is to die. I can see this elicited a lot of questions. Please, Michael and Eva, what did you want to ask?
I just want to ask where it's written in the Torah about pikuach nefesh. If you know.
Well, I'll give you the source immediately. Parashat Achrimot,
Which parasha in Hebrew?
Please wait a second. It's in Torah.
It's on page 413 in the Halacha book.
The Halacha book, good. The words in the Torah is asking. ושמרתם את חוקותיי ואת משפטיי ואשר יעשה אותם אדם וחי בהם, אני השם. So this is Leviticus, yeah, Vayikra chapter 18, verse 5.
In Hebrew, 18 is
י"ח. פרק י"ח, פסוק ה'.
Thank you very much.
My rules and my judgments, and the person shall do them and he shall live by them. And this is what is based. Meant to live according to Torah, not to die according to Torah. Okay, so that is the law of pikuach nefesh. So therefore, when it comes to Shabbat, which is not one of these three averot chamuot, these very stringent sins, so Shabbat, you should rather break Shabbat than to die, right? And Talmud even says, better break one Shabbat and keep many Shabbatot than to keep one Shabbat and die, and then you won't be able to keep any Shabbat. So that's very, very clear. If there is any chance, even the smallest chance, that there is a situation of danger here, you have to go and save that person, break Shabbat straight away. Don't worry about anything, just save his life, get him to a doctor, get him to an ambulance, call. It says in the Talmud, so very interesting, when you're breaking Shabbat in order to save someone's life, it should be Gdolei Israel, the greatest rabbi should do it, so that nobody should even think that it's forbidden. Yeah, there was a case in my, a long time ago, in my grandfather's synagogue in Paris. And there was a story there, I think somebody had an attack in the middle of prayers and he fainted. It was Yom Kippur, I think, and the rabbi went and he took the phone and called the ambulance. He wanted everybody to see that this is the halacha. There is no discussion about it. You can save someone's life, you do it. Now, somebody asked something again. Is their hand here up? No. Okay, I can see it's already 11:31. So I should probably give time. I can see a lot of questions have come up here. Okay. So I think that's enough for the lecturing part. I'm going to start answering questions soon. Now, just to give a little clarity, so what we have just done now, we've given you the main rules of what is a melacha, and we've given you an overview of the melachot of Shabbat. I'm still a bit unclear if it's me next week or is it already Renata, but anyways, you keep this all in mind, because this will allow you to approach any situation that comes, and you'll be able to know, okay, so what is this? First of all, is this the melacha? Is the melacha deoraita? Is the melacha derabanan? What do I need to do? Is it a hard situation? Well, why can't I keep the Torah? Is it a life-threatening situation? And of course I should break the Torah. Doesn't matter, the Rabbanan deoraita. What if it's not life-threatening? What if it is somebody is sick, but he's not sick, he's got a flu, he's got a fever, he's uncomfortable. Okay, so then you cannot break the Torah. Maybe you'll be allowed very often to break some din de Rabbanan, some rabbinic law that they did not enforce on sick people. So you have to know what you're dealing with. Okay, great. Now I'm going to first look at the questions that are in the chat room, and then I can open the space for oral questions. Okay, so first of all, very good. Moshe David wrote that everybody who doesn't have the PDF, please send an email. Make sure you get the PDF. If somebody hasn't read the chapter of structure of Shabbat at the latest now, you should read it. And I'm confused about Rebecca Ketura. I'm confused about what is allowed regarding washing on Shabbat, like your body, hair, plus say kitchen items. Okay, I'm not sure what kitchen items is a different thing. We're going to have a whole shiur here about the kitchen. I think Rabbi Yair will give it. So I'm not going to go into that now. Washing on Shabbat. Okay. So here, let's start with the basic. What problem there would be in washing? Are you talking about washing your own body? Yeah, body and hair on Shabbat. So of course, there's no melacha in washing yourself. You're allowed to wash yourself. You wash your hands before the bread. So technically, there should be no problem. However, here the chachamim, the rabbis, made certain prohibitions on washing, because the normal way to wash yourself, traditionally, was always to heat up water. Yeah, you needed to. You take water from the well, you heat it up, and then you have hot water and mix it with cold water, and you get bath water. So of course, heating up water is cooking. Cooking on Shabbat is forbidden. It's asur. And the Talmud has a lot to talk about. It tells us about how people would go to the bathhouse on Shabbat, and it led to problems because the bathhouse attendant started heating up water on Shabbat, and it led to huge problems. So the rabbis forbade full body hot showers on Shabbat. So you're not allowed to have a hot shower of your whole body on Shabbat. And that's a so. By the way, just in brackets, without the rabbinic prohibition, you should also find out how your taps work. Different places have very different ways what happens when you open the tap. Yeah, I know that, for example, in England, you open the tap, it might turn on a boiler. It might be lighting a fire when you open the hot tap. In some places, you open the hot tap, it doesn't turn on a fire, but it makes more cold water go into the boiler of your house, and then that will start heating up. That will start. You're bringing more water into the machine, and that will heat up water in the way you're cooking when you open the tap. Here in Finland, we researched it. Also, you open the tap, and if you open a hot tap, you open it on the hot side, the mixer tap. So more cold water is going to go into your building system, and that will be heated up. Now, that's not the water that you're going to use, because you're using the hot water that's on the top of the tap, but you are bringing more cold water into the system, which is a problem. It might not be the direct melacha, the grama of the melacha, but it's still a problem. So that's just something that to find out what exactly happens in your country and in your system when you open the tap. In some countries, it could be a melacha deoraita even. Anyways, but that wasn't the point. So anyways, whatever your system is, you cannot have a hot shower on Shabbat or a warm shower even on Shabbat. Now, if you wanted to wash yourself partially, you're dirty in some part of the body, you feel so washing some part of the body is okay. You're allowed to wash your hands. You all do netilat yadayim, wash your face in the morning. That is fine, right? Washing your you want to mention washing your hair. Yeah, so washing your hair, there's an extra problem of schita, of squeezing. Yeah, I'm not talking about my short hair. I'm talking more like a lady or a man who has long hair. It could be a man who has thick hair also. You could have a problem of squeezing there. You're not allowed to squeeze on Shabbat, just like you're not allowed to squeeze a grape and take out grape juice. You're not allowed to squeeze a cloth, a wet towel to take the water out. That's a form of washing the towel, melacha. So too, you wouldn't be allowed to squeeze your hair. So that is one of the things. If you're gonna wash your hair on Shabbat, you have to be very, very careful to dry it very gently with the towel. Yeah, you can't start squeezing around. That would be a practical thing about hair. What about the cold shower? Yeah, not very pleasant maybe at this time of the year, but in the summer when it's very hot, a cold shower could be quite nice. Yeah. So here it's interesting. From the Talmud's perspective, the Halacha's perspective, it's completely permitted. If it's cold, go ahead. It does seem that there was a custom in many places to avoid it because of these reasons. Like I mentioned, it might lead to squeezing the hair, it might lead to squeezing the towel, but definitely it's very uncomfortable, it's very hot, then there is place to be lenient. There's even I heard a story that I heard that a few years back, sometimes you have Thursday, Friday, Shabbat. Thursday is Yom Tov, Friday is Yom Tov, Shabbat. So in Israel, there was once 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbat straight after. So apparently all the rabbis said it was boiling hot Rosh Hashanah that year. It was early on in the year. All the rabbis said, it's not you're allowed to have a shower on Friday, on Rosh Hashanah. You have to have a shower. It's not respectful to go into Shabbat so sweaty after 2 days of prayer, hours in the synagogue, and sweating away. It's a mitzvah that everybody should have a cold shower on that Rosh Hashanah. So sometimes it's the right thing to do. Okay. How about preventing a disaster? Okay, so that we discussed. So that you're not allowed to do. As we said, you're not allowed to strengthen your house. You can't do a melacha deoraita in order to protect your finances. You might be allowed to do a melacha de rabbanan. So you could ask a non-Jew. Usually you're not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a melacha. In this case that you're mentioning, that a storm might come and break your house, you could ask a non-Jew to repair your house, to strengthen your house. Because asking a non-Jew to do a melacha is an isur de rabbanan. Now I'm thinking it's not so simple because it's not so simple because that would be, this is the melacha deoraita, to strengthen your wall. So that you're not allowed. You're not even allowed to ask a non-Jew, but you could ask a non-Jew maybe to do it in a funny way. That it could be rabbinic. It's a bit hard to build in a funny way. Whatever. It's something to discuss seriously with the rabbi if such a case would happen that you would need it to happen on Shabbat. Maybe you could hint to a non-Jew, not say clearly you want him to do it. There could be ways, but definitely you are not allowed to break Shabbat in order to protect your finances. It says you should be ready to give all your property rather than to break the Torah, break an isur deoraita in the Torah, rather give all your property away. That's a rule, by the way, in all the halachot of the Torah. You should be aware. Yeah, you can't start working on Shabbat because you're gonna lose your job. Yeah, you can't wear shatnez clothes which have a mixture of wool and linen because the other clothes are too expensive for you. Yeah, you can't break the Torah because of financial considerations. Right. What about reading during Shabbat? Can you read Talmud or learn Hebrew? Okay. So first of all, to answer your question, Justin Salomon, absolutely, you are allowed to study Talmud. It's actually a very big mitzvah to study Torah on Shabbat. It's the best time to study Torah. The Ben Ish Chai, one of the big rabbis of Kabbalah, said that 1 hour on Shabbat is worth 1,000 hours of Torah study during the week. So that, and many say that's why God gave us Shabbat. We could have a 1 day of holiness when we don't have anything else and we concentrate on the Torah. So that's the best thing you could do on Shabbat. But reading in general, is there any prohibition to read on Shabbat? So that's an interesting point. Okay, for some reason I don't have. Reading in general on Shabbat is a very, very good point. It does say that a prohibition, it says in the prophet Isaiah, he said, you will honor the Shabbat from the way from going on your way to doing, and also about talking. So there is an idea that you shouldn't talk about things which are not which are forbidden on Shabbat, and planning things that you're going to do during the week. You shouldn't go around to study your field and see what it needs, and also, so reading, it's also brought down Where is it written? Okay. Reading, where is it in Shulchan Aruch? You shouldn't be counting. You have to count, but not things which are related to your business or to things like that. About reading, yeah. So anything business related, yeah, reading bills, about how much you have to pay, anything related to your job, your business, yeah, bills, contracts, that would be forbidden. Torah is obviously permitted. Just general stories, books, that's a bit borderline. It does say in Shulchan Aruch you shouldn't, but there is a leniency that's often brought down that if the stories have nice morals and you can learn something positive from it, so then that would be a positive use of your time and not comparable to just studying something doing something work related. Also, it's brought down as a leniency. The Rema, or Moshe Israel, as he says, you're allowed to read something that's like a science, that you're going to grow wiser from it. It's not holy science, it's not Torah, but it's good to know science. It's good to know how the world works. You understand the world better. That makes you love God more. So that sort of study or reading would be okay. So Torah and anything related to Judaism and learning about Torah in a positive way, that's a big mitzvah, amazing. Anything work related, absolutely not. And what's a bit in between, so random novels, depends. There are some novels you shouldn't be reading the whole week. They're completely full of, perverse things or philosophies that are against the Torah that you should never be reading in the first place. But assuming that it's a kosher entertainment of a book, so if maybe some rabbis will say it'll be okay if you can learn some sort of good moral from it, but it should be definitely better. The best thing you should do on Shabbat is to constantly study Torah. You said learning Hebrew, definitely if you can learn Hebrew, that's an amazing tool, because you're never going to be able to learn Torah properly if you don't know Hebrew. You can learn a lot of things with art school, with translations, but it's always going to be very limited compared to knowing Hebrew. Okay, then that's something general about animals. Okay, that's a general question. Which labor is this for? Is a security guard also within? I don't really understand this question. Tabitha Rivera, this is about the electronic doors?
No, it's about pikuach nefesh.
Pikuach nefesh. So somebody's life is in danger?
Exactly.
So then you can do whatever you want, any melacha. Yeah? If there is danger, or even if there's a chance it might be dangerous, yeah? Then you have just go ahead and do it. Yeah, no question. It says in the Talmud, anybody who asks too many questions when there's something dangerous, he's a killer, because those questions might be you might lose the chance to save his life. So anything like this, somebody faints, somebody just there's no time for questions. Yes,
I think might the question be that if you work as a security guard, you have a duty to go to work on Shabbat once in a while, and if that's okay.
Right, that's the question. Okay, if you work as a security guard, okay, so yes, if your job is to save people's lives, then that's what you should do, right? In Israel, there's the police, there's the army, all these things have to work on Shabbat, right? That's very interesting. My cousin was a policeman, a religious Jew. He was a policeman for a while in Israel. And it was very interesting because he would walk to go to the police station. And sometimes his friends were not religious at all. They would ask, do you like a lift? So he said, no, it's Shabbat, I don't drive. So he didn't understand, because once he get to the police station, he touched everything, the electricity, and he drove, and that's the job, you're a policeman. So what do you mean you're not gonna say no? Once I'm on duty, then it's my responsibility to save people's lives and to work as a policeman. So then that overrides Shabbat. But until my duty starts, my duty hasn't started. So I walk to the police station because you're not allowed to drive on Shabbat. So it's not an easy thing, to be a doctor, to be a policeman, to be a soldier on Shabbat. But it's an area of halakha you have to be aware of. Yeah, because there's certain things that have to work, being a security guard, like you said. If there is a way to arrange things without breaking Shabbat, to arrange it in advance, for sure you should do that. Yeah, but it's not always possible. Okay, many things have changed in modern times. For example, hot water. Why not update the rules? After all, they always say that the Torah is a living Torah, that it's updated and renewed. Okay, so this word of updating, renewing, is a long philosophical discussion. We have a whole shiur just on that, but on a very simple level. What Hashem said in the Torah that we can't change, because that's Hashem's Torah. Yeah.
Can I just say something, because we're two people holding up hands, and I wonder if some.
Okay, sorry, I'm holding up hands. Okay, so you're right. Maybe we'll leave Arad Yanai's question last, because that's more philosophical than practical. Okay. Yes, Giselle, please.
Did you send me that?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Ravi. About what I wrote about the animals' lives, either if it's my pet animal or if I'm walking by and there is a situation where there is an animal in danger or something like that. Is that also allowed? Am I allowed to save an animal's life? Or
okay. So you're not okay. So the law is like this: you cannot break the Torah prohibition in order to save an animal's life. That law is specific for humans. It's in the Torah. You shall live according to it. But there are definitely many leniencies in halacha whenever there is tsar baalei chaim involved. When there is pain for animals involved, then most of the time the law is any rabbinic prohibition, any prohibition the Rabbanan is removed. So somebody mentioned here, very good example was this case of the milking of the cows. So milking of the cow and getting the cow and getting yourself a cup of milk, that's a prohibition from the Torah. So we can't say we're allowing it because we're going to allow it because because it hurts the animal's udder, yeah. If we don't do it, but what we can do is we turn it into a rabbinic prohibition. So you milk the cow, but you don't use the milk. You let it go on the floor. You go into a bin. That's rabbinic prohibition because that's not doing the melacha as we said for its original purpose. That's doing it for a different purpose. The melacha de Rabbanan, and it's tsar baalei chaim. The animal is in pain if you don't do it. So that would be a case of allowing. So that's the answer to you, that you cannot break a clearly written Torah prohibition in order to save an animal. You can break certain situation rabbinic prohibition. For example, asking a non-Jew to do what needs to be done would be okay for tsar baalei chaim usually.
Okay, and entering to ask a non-Jew, I just have one very, very little question, and that's it. I heard before from other rabbis that actually Jews supposed not ask a non-Jew to do anything for them, except if the non-Jew says themselves that I could do it for you, I could do it on your behalf. Because when you are asking a non-Jew to do something for you, you are creating something to another person. Is that right or it's wrong?
Okay. So, very good. So you're going to have a shiur just on this subject, I believe, later, just on the Amira Lakum asking non-Jews. On a very simple level, the law is like this. A Jew is not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a melacha for him on Shabbat. But there are many leniencies. One of them, like you said, when you're not asking, when you're just saying something, and the non-Jew realizes from what you're saying that you want help, that is something we often use, you're right. And then there are also many, many situations where the prohibition of asking non-Jew is removed. Like I said, I don't know, somebody's in a lot of pain, somebody's going to have a big financial loss. There are situations where certain levels of a non-Jew, asking non-Jew will be removed. But that will be a shiur for itself.
Yeah, I understand. It was just a memory. Thank you very much.
Rebecca Ketura. No, you're still lifting your hand. How can I help?
No, I just wanted to add a comment about the labor on Shabbat. So basically, I understand, for instance, that in Israel, where everyone is Jewish, somebody has to do certain jobs. But like if you live in communities, say Oslo, where you have a small Jewish community, I mean, say you're a doctor then, I mean, you could probably get somebody else to do the shifts on Shabbat. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to do them unless there is some kind of emergency crisis situation where somebody needs an open heart surgery there and then, and the other person is abroad or something. So I'm just saying that my kind of comment is more like there are situations where you can still avoid doing labor on Shabbat, even though you have a job that, you know, initially means that you have to save lives. So
Yeah,
I mean, it really
absolutely.
depends on the situation. So I just kind of wanted to add that comment.
Yes. So absolutely, you're absolutely right. If you shouldn't think that the Shabbat doesn't apply to doctors. Yeah, obviously, if it's not your shift, or if you can arrange that somebody else takes those shifts, then there is no real reason why we should take that shift. There's no reason why it should be your responsibility, right? And definitely you should try, like you said, in Oslo, in Sweden, to arrange things in a way that you don't need to break Shabbat. But definitely, in the case where you would, that would be something that you could find which should be okay in a situation where you have to. Interesting. You meant there is one thing you should know. I do remember when I lived in England, I lived in Gateshead, and many other religious communities around the world. What you have is you have Hatzalah. You have volunteers, Jewish volunteers, who will have an ambulance and who will do first aid and things like that. And it's very interesting. They will always answer the phone on Shabbat. They'll help on Shabbat. So you could ask the question, well, why are they doing it? Why, people can just call a normal ambulance. But there's something very special when you have a Jew helping another Jew that you can call. They're going to take their job with much more seriously in a way, because, they're going to save their friend's life, So there is obviously also the fact that somebody might be able to do more for saving someone's life than somebody else. Yeah. But I think in your case, you're definitely right that if you're a doctor and you can arrange your shifts, you anyways need to take holiday. You can't work the whole time. So you should definitely try to arrange your shifts in a way that you would not have to break Shabbat. Okay. Anything else? I think. Okay. So anybody who has not yet read the chapter, should finish the chapter, and if you have, I think you could move on to the next chapter on Muktzeh. There's a chapter there called Muktzeh, which is all about the things which you're allowed to move on Shabbat, what you're not allowed to move on Shabbat. You should try to advance to that. There's still a lot of things to talk that we didn't talk about in the Melachot. You should try to, but the Bezrat Hashem, I hope we'll have a chance. There was a big questions about carrying last time, which we didn't really have a chance. Carrying is its own world, really. But Bezrat Hashem of the Shiurim will get things clear. And if anything you feel is lost, is forgotten, write it down, come back to us, and we'll try to answer all the questions. This question is very good about the changes in modern times and updating the Torah. That's really a shiur of Ashkafa. So I think maybe it's best we leave it for another time because it's getting very late now. And Bezrat Hashem will continue on that. A good week, everybody.